Hi. So in this video styled podcast, I'm going to be talking about multiraciality, and the connection it has with food. Before I begin, I'm going to list some of the key concepts that I'm going to be talking about: race, multiraciality, food culture, food fusion, and identity. So those are going to be the 5 key terms that I'm going to be talking about. And then throughout this podcast, I will also give the definitions. So let's start. So race, right? What is race is often a question that I asked after learning that race is a social construct. In the reading, The Theory of Racial Formation by Ammi and Winott, we learned that race is a social construct. And when I first heard that, I was honestly a little shocked. Part of me didn't want to believe that something that's been integrated for so long and I feel like has been part of my identity formation is made up. But after further reading and further thinking, I realized that race is a way to make people up, and it's a way to place people into categories. And we see categorizing is seen as needed in order to understand people in our society. It's a fundamental concept that shapes the history, policies, and economic culture of the US. I thought this was very interesting how race is something that's so important for so many people, and how thinking of it as a social construct really opened my eyes and made me think, okay, what is there more, or what else is also made up that we think is normal? Connecting it to multiraciality. So what is multiraciality? In the article Multiracial Minorities, Erasing the Color by Bijan Gillenshaw, I believe, they define multiraciality including the case of biracial persons and persons synthesizing 2 or more diverse heritages, such as persons with African, Indian, European heritages. With this definition, I came to the conclusion that multiraciality is a way of combining cultures and making them or integrating them into one, which forms more unique identities and cultures that are rich. I think multiraciality is something that's so beautiful and something that often we don't really look on or take further explore it, because it's just something that I know in my life I haven't had the chance to talk to other people about their experiences being multiracial. I have actually with my friend a little bit, but not going further and having a deep conversation. That after reading that definition and after thinking about it, I think that's something very interesting. And obviously I took an interest of it because it's my topic for this project, but I definitely want to talk to her more about being multiracial, having her Indian and also her American side of the family and what that means for her, and just learning more about how she goes through life with that, or how it has shaped her identity. In the article Multiraciality and Racialized Politics in the United States by Christine Kaplan, we also learned that she states that talking about multiracial people, she says their diverse identity affects how they navigate their social world. And I found this very interesting, and I found myself thinking, do multiracial people feel like they need to fit in only one category? And as I kept thinking about that, something that popped into my head was Hines Ward. In the article about mixed race, not about whiteness, we learn about Hines Ward and his story. And previously, before reading this, I didn't really know who Hines Ward is. I wouldn't consider myself a super sports nerd. I only know about my team in the NFL and some other teams, but to be honest, I don't know really about history. In this article, I learned that he was an NFL player. He played 14 seasons for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that he was born in Seoul and then moved to the US at the age of 1, and he comes from Korean and African American parents. his story was actually very fascinating with me because I learned that as a young boy, he felt ashamed of his culture and his mother. And this really stood out to me because when I first read that, I was a bit confused. I'm like, whoa, like, how could you be ashamed of your own mother? But as I kept thinking, I, in a way, could relate to him. Not in feeling ashamed of my own mom, but feeling ashamed of my culture. There was a point in my life where I stopped speaking Spanish and I stopped partaking in traditional activities or just traditions in my family because I just felt ashamed because in school I never had someone to be able to speak Spanish with, and I often felt like an outsider when I spoke it in public. So I just found myself only speaking English even at home. And that's something that if I could tell my younger self, I would talk to her and tell her that it's okay to speak Spanish and it's okay to get weird looks at because people are just confused in how a small young girl is able to speak 2 languages when majority of people can only speak 1. So learning about that and his experience with feeling ashamed of his Korean side, or yes, I would say Korean side, because in the article it talks about how his just traditions and beliefs were different from his family's traditions and beliefs were just different from his classmates. And then as I kept reading, we learned that he eventually grew to appreciate his mom and his Korean culture, and I think that's something that's super beautiful. And even though he struggled with forming that identity or being able to relate to them in that side of his culture, he eventually grew to appreciate it and grew to realize everything that his culture has and his mom have shaped him, who he is as a person. As well as they also in this article talk about a term called claim us if we're famous syndrome. It's where mixed race people reach a level of achievement and they become acknowledged by the racial communities that would have ignored them previously if they weren't as successful in their profession and in their career. I thought that was something very interesting because I never really thought about that before reading this. Like, I never thought about maybe in a way when they receive this claim us when we're famous syndrome, they feel like, whoa, I'm actually connecting with that side of my culture and they are accepting me, like they can accept who I am. And I just thought that was interesting because it made me wonder of how many other people have faced or have claimed their other cultures because of their success. So I thought that was very interesting. And then connecting it back to food culture and food fusion. Food is a way for us to learn about histories and cultures. And in the article written by Let's Eat Around the World, they state that food tells a story of people's history, beliefs, traditions, values, and it offers a glimpse into their own way. And instantly when I read this definition, for me, the first thing that came up to my head was a traditional Mexican dish called chiles en nogada. And I think this dish came to my head because this dish has a lot of importance. It's often eaten on the Independence Day of Mexico. And I think it looks very tasty. I've never had the chance to eat it. My mom has never made it for us, but the dish represents the flag of Mexico. So it has red, white, and green incorporated into the dish, and it's a way to represent the pride of being Mexican. So when I read that definition of it's a way of people being able to tell their history, I instantly thought of that because it's a way for people to feel the pride of being Mexican. And then what is food fusion, right? What is food fusion? Escar School of Culinary describes it as bringing together ingredients from different cultures and merging recipes. So I immediately, excuse me, I immediately thought, what are these? Like, what is food fusion? What are some examples that I couldn't think of right away? And then as I kept reading, I learned that there's different types of fusion. Some popular types are Tex-Mex, Cajun, French, Vietnamese, Indo-Chinese, and American sushi. So now we're going to be talking about some examples of food fusion. The first example I'm going to be talking about is Korean corn dogs. Korean corn dogs is a combination of Korean and American culture. I personally have had the chance to try it, and it was very delicious. I think it's interesting how there is a variety of different corn dogs. I know there's a hot Cheeto one, a potato, I believe, and a cheese one. They're very delicious, and I think it's so interesting how they took, or the creator of it took, the corn dog and their Korean culture and integrated it into making something so delicious. And it was actually very, very delicious. If you had the chance to try it one, do it. It's so good. The second example I'm going to be talking about, excuse me, is birria pizza. It's combining Mexican and Italian culture. Birria is a pretty traditional dish in Mexico. It's personally one of probably my favorite ones that my mom makes. It's super good. I know birria tacos has been going pretty popular on TikTok, but when I saw birria pizza, I was actually very intrigued because I love pizza. So I definitely want to try this because it just looks yummy and delicious, and I think it would be cool to try it. And then the third example I'm going to be talking about is sushi burritos. So sushi burritos is a combination of Mexican and Japanese culture. Personally, I've never had the chance to try it. I'm not a big seafood person, so I don't know how it would go, but I do like burritos. So maybe in the future, I will take the chance and try it. And then finally, to connect it all back together, we're going to be talking about identity, right? So how does food, multiraciality, everything we talked about, how does that come together, right? In the article, The Intersection of Culture and Cuisine, How Food Shapes Our Identity, the University of British Columbia states that food serves not only as a means of nourishment, but it's also a way for individuals to engage with and better understand various cultures and communities. Food allows people to express their identities and cultures. Food is often the first point of contact in experiencing learning about the different food cultures that exist between and within communities. As I was reading this article, I started to reflect, and I agree that food is the first place where we come in contact with different cultures. We are trying different foods, we're trying different spices, different traditional plates. And I think food is honestly, like, if you're trying to get into learning about different cultures, I think food is an amazing way to start with, because you're not only learning about, yes, you're tasting the different spices, but you're also learning about the different traditional dishes. You're also learning about the history of the place. For example, the chiles en nogada, you learn that it's eaten on traditionally on the Independence Day of Mexico because it represents the pride of being Mexican. Identity is an aspect of the combinations of different values, beliefs, traditions, and cultures that make up who we are. And food fusions I think is honestly a beautiful way for people to express their identities of multiraciality. It allows people to connect with their cultures and to learn more about them if they're not too aware of their other side of the culture. Trying the food is honestly an amazing way, like I said, to get integrated into the culture and really know more about the history. I think it's also important for multiracial people to appreciate their cultures and to and to just appreciate what they have, because it's something very beautiful that they've had the experience to explore. And it's very interesting how their identities are formed through food as well.